Hey, what's going on, everybody? Blue Oaks family specifically. Want to let you know we're giving y'all some extra marriage content today. Whether you joined us for our Married Life Nights or you just got this email and you want to check it out, Stephanie and myself, we're going to talk about and give some bonus content all about marriage, and we're excited to do that today. If you're brand new, don't know who I am, my name is Jason Caine. This is my wife, Dr. Stephanie Caine. She is literally a marriage expert. She teaches all sorts of marriage and family life classes at William Jessup University, so she's the expert. But we want to talk to you today about a subject that we think is relevant to every single marriage, and that is the subject of betrayal. Within the context of marriage, man, betrayal takes several different forms. Some of you may be thinking that only happens within the context of infidelity, but really betrayal can come in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I think when we think of the word betrayal, it just sounds like such a strong word. You're thinking, whoa, I've never betrayed anybody, or I haven't been betrayed, because you're just expecting like what we see on TV. Think of a soap opera and the music comes in and boom, the truth comes out. But betrayal actually is when there's been a broken trust in the relationship. So when you think about it along those lines, when has there been a time in my relationship or in my marriage where I felt like I broke trust or my spouse has broken trust? In that light, you probably can think of one or more instances when that has occurred.
Yeah, so for the next 15 minutes or so, we just want to have a conversation on 10 ways you can ruin a marriage.
Yeah.
Or another way to put it is 10 ways that you can break trust. But we're not just going to leave you with negative stuff. We'll tell you what to do when trust has been broken, because it can happen in every single relationship. So 10 ways to ruin a marriage. Number one is conditional commitment.
Yeah, I can't get past ruin. I mean, that's really tough to think about it.
Yeah.
But, really with those 10 things, if you don't attend to them and they grow, then you can potentially ruin a marriage out of that. So yeah, starting with conditional commitment. We know as believers the unconditional love of God, which basically tells us that no matter what we do, you can count on that love. He's committed to that relationship, to the relationship that we have with him. We struggle with our commitments, even though he doesn't, and how that strengthens the bond between ourselves and the Lord. And the same thing can happen to a certain degree in a marriage, which is you ask yourself the question, can I do anything to keep my spouse from having love for me? Mm-hmm. Can I break the love of my spouse for me, whether it's my looks changing, or if I decide to change careers, if I lose my job, if I'm not making as much money, if I'm struggling with infertility, whatever the case may be, could that break that love? And in marriages where spouses feel that sense of, okay, I'm here under conditions.
Yeah.
I have to follow this particular path or else I'll lose my spouse's trust. That does feel like a betrayal that breaks the trust, because we go into a covenant in a marriage that says that goodness and bad times, whatever the case, health or bad health, that you will be committed to this marriage. And not having so much conditions in a relationship can feel like a betrayal.
Yeah, I mean, the basic vows that you always give at a wedding, for richer or for poor, in good times and bad, in sickness and in health, is really getting at the idea of that my commitment to you, to my spouse, is not going to be based upon conditions. It's not going to be based upon whether things are great or things are bad, but I'm committed to you. And the thing about commitment that is unconditional is that there's safety in that. And in a relationship context, when you feel safe in the context of your relationship, that's when a relationship thrives. But when you don't, that's when a relationship can be ruined.
I do want to give an asterisk real quick about that. Except in cases where there's abuse taking
100%,
place.
absolutely.
If you feel in danger, if you're being physically or mentally abused, if you're losing yourself, if you're concerned about your mental health, your physical health, that of your children, then that definitely, I would say, goes outside of the bounds of unconditionally staying in a relationship.
Yeah. Another way you can ruin your marriage, number one, is conditional commitment. Number two is a non-sexual affair.
Yeah. Oftentimes when we think about betrayal, we immediately go to infidelity. Mm-hmm. Granted, that is a break in trust for sure, a major damage in the relationship. However, it is not the sole way that betrayal can occur in a relationship. And in fact, studies show that infidelity in a marriage does not necessarily lead to divorce. There are many cases that people are able to reconcile and get past an infidelity. There are many other reasons, and we're going to go through that list of how someone can break betrayal in a relationship.
Yeah, so a non-sexual affair is definitely something that can lead down a road that it ruins a relationship and causes betrayal. I do have to add this caveat as we're given this list that we got it from a great author and writer, one of the individuals that Stephanie uses a lot of his resources in this class. What's his name?
Dr. John Gottman and his wife as well. Yep.
Yeah.
They do some resources. A non-sexual affair, I do want to add, I talked about if it's not sex, but an emotional affair. So basically having, have you ever heard of like work husband, work wife?
Right.
If there's a friendship with someone of the opposite sex where there's an emotional connection, they know about what's happening in your life on a regular basis than your spouse. You find more comfort and intimacy with them, even if it's not physical intimacy, than you do with your spouse. You're communicating with that person much more than you are with your spouse. That would still be considered a form of infidelity.
Yeah. This next one is pretty obvious. Another way to ruin a marriage, lying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what more can we say about that? Be honest.
If you're caught in a cycle of lies, if you tell one lie, if you do anything that has lying or a seed of a lack of truth to it, it's going to cause and ruin your relationship. If you can't trust your spouse, then who can you trust?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes we kind of delineate between small lies and big lies, but the reality is if you're not trustworthy, then your spouse can't trust you on big or little things.
Yeah, 100%. The next one is forming a coalition against your spouse. What exactly does that allude to?
Basically, putting together an army. Either you have an army of one or an invisible army of many or an actual army of people who you talk bad about your spouse to, who affirm you of why you're right and why they're wrong. It's not to say that you shouldn't have a support system, that you shouldn't have people who you trust, who can confide in to help hold you accountable and to help you grow in your relationship. But when you start using those people to affirm you and to help build you against your spouse, and then when you bring that into an argument, when you say, well, so-and-so and so-and-so says you're wrong, that is a betrayal of trust.
Yeah, I think there are two primary coalitions that people form. One with their friends, the other one is with their families. If you are always going to your family to support your position or friends to support your position, that's a key way that you're going to have a breach in trust in a relationship, that you're going to have some betrayal. If your spouse feels like you always are siding with your family versus them, you're certainly going to lead down the road towards ruining your relationship.
In couples therapy, we talk about dyads. So it's you and your spouse, how strong dyads are stronger than triads. And so you triangulate when you bring a third party into that, and it weakens the dyad between you and your spouse, because what happens is that gets weakened and you're forming a stronger bond with whoever is or how many people are in this third party that's now in the relationship.
That's PhD level talk right there. Dyad, triad. I failed all of that stuff. I don't even know what that means. The next one is absenteeism or coldness. Now, this is something that can happen when your spouse makes you upset, or there's a conversation that needs to be had, and you just allow yourself to be absent from the home, or you're cold towards your spouse.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. There's a lot of things that can factor into why somebody would become absent or cold. It could be something that's happened within the relationship that has caused them to withdraw, or maybe it's something that's happening within them that's causing them to withdraw from the relationship and being unwilling to contribute to closeness.
Yeah, it's like, let's just give an example. Husband and wife are married. Husband wants to go play golf. The wife says, hey, I'd appreciate it if you didn't play golf this week. Husband says, fine, I'll stay home, but it's cold towards his wife the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like you're punishing the spouse for not letting you do something. Now, this don't have nothing to do with me. I know I play golf. This would never happen in my relationship. I'm just giving an example for y'all out there.
I'd say also in general, if there's stress in the household, let's say if God forbid there's a sick child or there's an additional stress that's happened in the home, and the way that one spouse chooses to cope is by removing themselves from the home, being absent because being in there is too much stress. That does feel like a betrayal because it feels like abandonment.
Yeah, and you can also be present but absent at the same time.
Absolutely.
I mean, the easiest way to do it is with your phone. That you just dive into your phone and you don't know what's going on around you, and that can be a way that leads towards your relationship being cold. Here's number 6, withdrawal of sexual interest. That is a huge one.
Yeah, I mean, sex is the one thing that can only happen with your spouse. Within the context of a marriage, you cannot outsource that. You can outsource cleaning, you can outsource cooking, you can outsource babysitting, whatever the case may be, but you can't outsource sex. So when you withdraw sexual interest, it is, first of all, a major it's depriving your marriage and your spouse of something that's intimate that they can only get from you. And then it's also causing major damage to intimacy.
Yeah. Kevin, who is the married life pastor over at Bayside Granite Bay, made a very valid point. He says that sex should be about mutual pleasure.
Yeah.
That in the context of a relationship, and specifically in the context of a marriage, which is where sex should happen, that it should be all about mutual pleasure. And the only way that you can foster that is through conversation, is through exploration with one another. And doing that helps you to make sure that you don't withdraw. It's something that God has given us as a gift that we should enjoy. Both spouses should enjoy it and have conversations and figure out how to do that. Number 7, disrespect.
Yeah, disrespect. It's important to know what is disrespectful to your spouse. That can be different for different people.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting here and you're thinking, you know what, I don't really know what my spouse thinks is disrespectful behavior, or has there been a time when I've acted disrespectful to my spouse and I don't realize that I am? I think it's an important question to ask.
Yeah.
You know, what have I done, or what do you consider to be disrespectful behavior to you that maybe I'm not aware of?
Yeah, and then responding to that by saying, thanks for letting me know,
Yeah.
first of all, but not responding by saying, oh, that's not disrespectful. Listen, if they deem it as
Right.
disrespectful,
Then it
then to
is.
them it is. The next one, number 8, is unfairness. In other words, one person, one spouse
Yes.
always gets their way. The holidays are coming up.
Yeah.
You go to your folks' house for the holiday. Y'all are trying to figure out, do you go to her house, my house? If you're 1 year brand new married, get ready. This is going to
Yeah.
be something that comes up. How do you split the holidays? It's a difficult one.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the examples, unfairness in a relationship. Listen, a marriage is all about the two of you together figuring out what's right for you. But if you're always getting your way, that definitely is going to show you that you're down the path toward ruin.
Yeah, in the simplest form, it's, giving a little bit. There's going to be
Yeah.
times where you've had to give something a little, you got to give something up, your spouse has to give something up, and there should be moments of that. That should be part of the dance of the marriage. I had to give up a little bit, I had to give up a little bit. I also think biblically it's dying to yourself.
Yeah,
We're called to
100%.
die to ourselves regularly, and I think it's also that is thinking about, am I willing to transcend myself? Whatever I consider to be really important to me, am I willing to transcend that for the sake of this marriage? That makes a strong communication to your spouse of commitment and love that really draws you two so much closer together.
Yeah, the next one on the list, this is similar to unfairness. It's selfishness.
Yeah.
I mean, selfishness happens when you are only thinking about you but not thinking about your spouse.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time that you're going to be headed towards just a bad place if you're a selfish individual.
Sometimes it's a difficult transition when people have been single for a long time or maybe they're used to getting their way in their
Yeah.
family dynamics, and now they're having to come into a relationship and compromise, and all of a sudden compromising feels like a win-lose.
Yeah.
For me to win, you have to lose. If you're winning, then I'm losing. When you start thinking zero sum in your relationship, you need to ask yourself and look internally to see, am I struggling with selfishness? Is unfairness coming into this
Yeah.
relationship?
The last and final one that we're going to talk about that causes betrayal, that causes trust to be broken, is breaking promises.
Yeah, I think we use the same guidelines as lying. Sometimes we think, oh, it's just a little thing. I know I said I would do this and I didn't. But those things build over time.
Yeah.
And they basically the foundation of your marriage. It's like putting little cracks in it, and maybe nothing that collapses immediately,
Yeah.
but you destabilize the relationship when you're breaking promises, because now your spouse is going, I can't rely on you. I can't depend on you. And if I can't rely and depend on you, then resentment can come in and contempt can come into the relationship.
So here's the truth about this list. All of us can at some point in time in our relationship be guilty of any of these things.
Right.
At some point in time, if you're in a relationship with another individual, one of these things can come up and can cause a breach in the trust and can cause a certain level of betrayal to happen. Well, what happens when your spouse betrays you and they don't even know it? How do you deal with that? How do you handle that, man, there's something that has happened between the two of us, I'm upset about it, and they don't even know? Well, I think Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, really gives us some direction on what to do when betrayal has happened. Because this is what I know. Stephanie has no desire to hurt me. I have no desire to hurt her. but I also know that at some point in our relationship, we're going to hurt one another. And so when that happens, if the other party doesn't know and you just let it slide or you don't worry about it, it's going to continue to cause issues. But Jesus says it this way, and he's not specifically talking about a marital relationship. He's talking about in any relationship. This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15. He says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen, you have won them over. So Jesus talks about when someone has sinned against you or betrayal has happened or there's a lack of trust that happens in a relationship, that you go to that individual one-on-one. Another version of the scripture says go to them privately. And the hope is that restoration happens. The things that can ruin a marriage, these 10 things that we talked about today, they can ruin a marriage for sure, but you can also have conversations about them to help fix them so they don't have to ruin your marriage.
Yeah, Jesus is talking about clarity too. I mean, sometimes we operate under assumptions. Maybe our spouse did something that hurt us, and in our minds we think, well, you should have known better. How could you not know that this would be hurtful to me? And then you leave it in, and then you get more and more angry. You distance yourself even more and more from your spouse because as the days go by and weeks go by, you're thinking, you haven't even addressed this thing that you've done that's hurt me. And really what's happened is you did not communicate that you were hurt. I don't care how obvious you think it is. You should give your spouse the opportunity of knowing very clearly from you what it is that they did to hurt you, why it hurt you, and if you have an idea of what it would take to reconcile, have that discussion with them. And what is it going to take to repair what's the damage that's been done?
Betrayal often happens because of a lack of communication. I think almost every marital issue comes back to communication. And if we learn to deepen our communication with one another, then I think it will help. It will help marriages grow, but also it'll help betrayal to happen less.
Yeah, I feel like there's this myth or this deception of like, well, if I have to tell you, then it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah,
But really, when you think about it, it's
real.
deceptive because how does it feel when you tell somebody what you want and they actually do it?
Right.
That communicates someone who really cares about you, who takes your needs into account, and then they follow through with it. And the good thing about that is you get exactly what you asked for because they were able to give you what you specifically said you needed. And so this idea of, well, if I have to tell you, then it doesn't count, it's deceptive.
So let us give you 4 quick things before we get out of here on how to deepen communication. The first one is this, and if you came to the Marriage Life Nights, you know that we talked about this the first night. But if you want to deepen communication, the first thing is this: put your feelings into words.
Yeah, I think, and be honest about that and candid about your feelings, because sometimes what happens is when somebody betrays you, the first thing you want to do is what?
I ain't mad.
Either I ain't mad or I want to hurt you.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, you want to lie, hide behind it because you don't want to be vulnerable to them, or you're like, I want revenge.
Yeah.
There's something about communicating the authentic feeling, even if it's something that's hard to hear, that actually holds you accountable. It helps release that tension of wanting to act in that way. So in your subconscious, sometimes you behave maybe passive aggressively or in a way that is destructive because you haven't really voiced that, hey, what you did hurt me so bad that I want you to feel what I feel.
Yeah, put your feelings into words.
Yeah.
The second way to deepen communication is this: ask open-ended questions.
For clarity.
Yeah.
Don't make assumptions about why the spouse did what they said, what they did, or said what they said. Ask questions for understanding, not an interrogation, but for the sake of understanding.
Yeah. Asking open-ended questions does 2 things. It helps you understand better, but it also demonstrates that you have interest in what's going on in your spouse's life.
Right.
The third thing is follow up with statements that deepen connection. So this is very similar to asking open-ended questions, but you follow up with statements that deepen connection. Man, I hear that you're frustrated at your job. That statement in itself reveals that I've listened to you and I've heard you, and it's helping to deepen connection with your spouse.
Yeah, you're reflecting to make sure that you understand exactly what your spouse is saying. Sometimes you won't come to a resolution, but at least if your spouse feels understood by you, that could be enough to get them through whatever's happening.
Yeah, and then the final thing to help deepen communication is express compassion and empathy. Man, I can't tell you enough how important it is to, in a relationship, in a marriage relationship specifically, to be a relationship that's marked by compassion and empathy towards your spouse.
I can tell you in my sessions with my couples, there is no other moment of deeper transformation than when a spouse conveys empathy and the other spouse realizes that that was truly an empathic statement. You can feel the walls coming down. You can feel them move closer to each other emotionally when empathy and compassion is communicated authentically.
Yeah, there we go. 10 ways to ruin a marriage, 4 ways to deepen communication. Thank y'all so much for taking your time and watching. We know y'all could be doing other things. Hey, share this with some folks if you think it'll help their relationships. Thank you guys for joining us over the past several weeks as we've been going through these Married Life Nights. This won't be the end of content you see from us. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day.